too much to bear. To think that I brought this to her bedside, that it's because of me. And I just say, I'm so sorry, Mommy. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to my sister and my brother and my kids and my nephew and Tommy and my brother-in-law. I'm like so sorry. I'm so sorry. If it is me, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
That is a Savannah Guthrie, Nancy Guthrie's daughter, who has spent more than 55 days wondering if her own success, her own name, her own face on a national television screen every morning is the reason her 84-year-old mother is somewhere in the Arizona desert right now. Not a stranger's mother. Her mother. The woman who raised her. The woman who showed up for every milestone, every ordinary Tuesday, every moment that did not make the news, but made the life. And Savannah Guthrie, one of the most composed journalists in American broadcasting, sat in front of a camera and fell apart. Because the question she cannot escape, the question that wakes her up at 3 a.m, is whether the life she built, the career she earned, and the salary someone searched online in December of last year is what put a target on the back of a woman who could barely walk to her mailbox on a good day. That guilt is not rational. But grief never is. And what makes it worse, and what makes it genuinely unbearable to sit with, is that the answer to that question may already be sitting in a case file in a federal building in Tucson, and nobody is telling her what it says. Today is day 56 in the search for Nancy Guthrie. In this interview, the most raw and unfiltered we have heard from the Guthrie family since this began, did not just give us Savannah's pain. It gave us details. Specific, forensically significant details that this investigation has never publicly confirmed before. Details that, when you lay them against everything this series has documented over the past 7 weeks, might point in a direction that is becoming increasingly difficult to look away from. So, let us go through all of it. Because what came out of this interview deserves more than a headline. It deserves the kind of careful, precise analysis that the people following this case from the beginning have earned. Let's start with what Savannah described in the moments after Annie called her on the morning of February 1st. She said they thought at first that Nancy must have had a medical episode in the night, that maybe paramedics had come, that maybe there had been an emergency and she had been taken to a hospital. That is the only explanation that made any sense when the phone rang before dawn and Annie said the words, "Mom is missing." And then Savannah said something that stopped this investigation in its tracks for anyone paying close attention. She said the back doors were propped open, not the front door, the back doors, plural. Open when Annie arrived. Open in a way that looked like someone had left them that way deliberately. And in the same breath, she said Nancy's phone was on the nightstand. Her purse was untouched. Now her hearing aids were in the house. She was barefoot. She was in her pajamas. Think about the picture that combination of details paints. A woman who could barely walk to her mailbox on a good day. No shoes, no hearing aids, no phone, no purse. In her pajamas. Taken through a back door that was propped open in the middle of the night. That is not a woman who walked out of her own home. That is a woman who was carried, guided, or physically removed from a house that had been prepared for her removal before anyone arrived at the front. Now here's the detail that nobody has examined with the precision it requires. The suspect was captured on the front doorbell camera. The footage that the FBI worked with Google engineers to recover from back-end servers, the footage that the whole country has seen, shows the figure on the front porch, tapping the camera, covering the lens, moving with the calm, unhurried confidence that former FBI behavioral analysts described as ownership behavior. Moving like someone who knows exactly where they are and has no fear of being somewhere they should not be. But if the back doors were propped open, if that was the point of entry, the point where Nancy was actually removed from the home, then what was the figure on the front porch doing? Was he entering through the front at all? Or was he at the front camera specifically to disable it, to create a blind spot at the entrance point the neighborhood could see, while the actual operation was happening at the back of the property where no camera was running and no neighbor had a line of sight? That is a two-point operation. One person at the front managing the surveillance. There's one person, or the same person completing the circuit, at the back managing Nancy. And the back doors were propped open before that operation began, which means someone made a decision at some point before 1:47 in the morning on February 1st to ensure that the back of that property was accessible. Not locked, not secured, open, waiting. Now ask yourself a question that this investigation has been circling for 56 days without answering publicly. Who was the last person inside Nancy Guthrie's home before she disappeared? Who walked her through that front door at 9:50 in the evening, confirmed she was safely inside, and then drove away 4 miles into the desert night? And is it possible, not certain, not proven, but possible, that the back doors being propped open when Annie arrived at dawn is connected to the last person who stood at that back door saying goodnight? Tommaso Cioni has been officially cleared as a suspect by the Pima County Sheriff's Department. That clearance is on the record and it belongs in this analysis. But cleared is an investigative status. It means the current evidence does not support charging him. It does not mean new evidence cannot change that. It does not mean the questions stop. And the question of who would know to leave a back door accessible, who would know the layout of that property well enough to understand which entrance point was unwatched, decide which door could be left open without Nancy noticing in the hours between 9:50 at night and 1:47 in the morning. That question does not go away because a press conference was held. It goes deeper. 20 years of Saturday night dinners. 20 years of walking through that property, knowing its layout from memory, knowing which lights were broken and which cameras had no cloud subscription, and which back doors led to which parts of the yard. The kind of knowledge that does not require surveillance because it was simply absorbed through 2 decades of ordinary presence. The kind of knowledge that a stranger casing a property from the outside could spend months trying to acquire and still never fully have. And the back doors were propped open when Annie arrived, on a night when the one person who had been inside that house hours earlier was 4 miles away with no publicly confirmed alibi for the window between 9:50 p.m. and sunrise. Nancy was in tremendous pain. Savannah described it specifically in the interview. Her back was so bad that on a good day, she could walk to the mailbox and get the mail. Most days, she could not even do that. She was not wandering. She was not capable of wandering. She could not have opened a back door and walked out into the desert in her pajamas, without shoes and without her hearing aids at 2 in the morning. Whatever happened to Nancy Guthrie in those 41 minutes was done to her, not by her. And the back doors were propped open before it started. Now to the ransom letters. Because Savannah said something in this interview that most people who have been following this case were not expecting. Something that changes how the entire ransom narrative has to be read. Since February, the ransom letters have been treated largely as background noise. There were so many of them, sent to TMZ, to local Arizona news stations, to various outlets, that investigators and analysts alike began treating the whole category as unreliable. Too many letters, too much confusion, too little clarity about which ones were real and which were opportunists trying to insert themselves into a national story. The letters faded from the conversation. The investigation moved toward DNA and cell towers and forensic genealogy, and the ransom angle became something most people had quietly set aside. But Savannah has not set it aside. In this interview, she said clearly that while most of the letters are not real, she believes the 2 that were sent to the local television station and to TMZ, the 2 that appeared to contain specific details about the inside and outside of Nancy's home, may be legitimate. She said she tends to believe those 2 are real. That sentence carries more weight than it might appear to. Savannah Guthrie does not speak carelessly about this investigation. Every public statement she has made has been calibrated, reviewed, and in many cases shaped in part by the FBI before it reached a microphone. When she says she tends to believe those 2 letters are real, she is not expressing a personal hunch. She is reflecting what the people managing this investigation have guided her to understand. And what that means is that law enforcement has not abandoned the ransom thread. They are still treating it as a live line of inquiry, still analyzing those 2 letters, still asking what the specific details they contain tell us about who wrote them and how they obtained the information inside them. Because here's what those 2 letters apparently shared: details about the inside of Nancy's home, details about the outside of the property, specifics that a stranger who had never been inside that house could not have known, details that required either direct access to the property or a very specific source of information about it. And if those letters are real, if they were written by someone with actual knowledge of what happened on February 1st, then the person who wrote them either participated in the abduction or received a detailed account of it from someone who did. The ransom demand was $6 million, not 5, not 10, not a round number someone pulls from the air. 6 million is a surgical figure. It is the number someone arrives at when they understand the difference between a public figure's net worth and what they can actually access in liquid funds. It is the number someone calculates after years of proximity to the conversations a family has about money, about wealth, about what Savannah earns and what that means for the people around her. Someone searched Savannah Guthrie's salary online in December of last year, only 2 months before Nancy was taken. And whoever wrote those 2 letters that Savannah believes are real knew enough about the inside of that house to include details that made her believe them. And then there's the sheriff. Because this investigation cannot be discussed honestly without confronting the man who has been managing it and what this week revealed about his record under oath. The recall effort against Chris Nanos is no longer a rumor circulating on the internet. It is a formal process. The Pima County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to investigate the issues now at the center of that recall. And the issue that a retired FBI agent who has spent her career in federal law enforcement described as unsurvivable is not the disciplinary record from El Paso. It is not the 37 suspension days. No, it is not the use of force incident that put a suspect in the intensive care unit. It is that when Nanos was asked under oath in a formal deposition whether he had ever been suspended before, he said no. He had been suspended 8 times. That is not a misremembering. That is perjury. And perjury under oath in a formal legal proceeding does not carry the same weight as a press conference contradiction or a messaging inconsistency. It carries the weight of a crime. The unanimous no confidence vote from the deputies union, 200 officers, every single one, happened after the Nancy Guthrie investigation began. Not before. Not as a legacy judgment on a long career. After. After the crime scene was released in under 20 hours. After the DNA was sent to a private lab in Florida, instead of the FBI's rapid response facility at Quantico. After the pacemaker tracking operation was leaked to the press before it finished its sweep. After the search perimeter was drawn half a mile too short and missed a camera that captured a vehicle 8 minutes after Nancy's pacemaker went silent. 200 deputies. Unanimous. 0 exceptions. After watching their own sheriff manage the most watched missing persons investigation in the country. The retired FBI agent who analyzed this situation made a specific observation that deserves to sit with this audience. She said the crime scene decision at the beginning of this investigation is going to be a problem for the prosecution if this case ever reaches a courtroom. Not possibly a problem, going to be a problem. Because a defense attorney does not need to prove their client was not at the scene. They need to create doubt about the integrity of the evidence. In a crime scene that was released in under 20 hours, that saw a pool service company, a landscaping crew, food deliveries, a home health aide, reporters, and content creators pass through before the FBI had even finished its initial sweep, is a crime scene whose chain of custody a skilled defense attorney will spend weeks dismantling in front of a jury. What is equally revealing is what Nanos said about the DNA in a recent radio interview. He mentioned that 2 labs are now working on the biological evidence. 2. When this investigation began, the mixed DNA profile from inside Nancy's home was sent to a single private laboratory in Florida. Now there appears to be a second lab involved. That development has not been publicly explained. But it raises a question that the families of missing persons across this country understand instinctively. If the right lab had been used from the beginning, if the DNA had gone to Quantico, where the FBI's rapid processing protocols exist specifically for active kidnapping cases, would we be sitting here on day 54 still waiting for results? Would the genetic genealogy be further along? Would the family tree built from those two unknown profiles have already produced a name? Nobody can answer that with certainty. But the question itself is the accountability. And the man who made the decision that created the question is the same man who said under oath that he had never been suspended, and had been suspended 8 times. Savannah Guthrie is going back to work. There is a plan for her return to the Today Show, and the image of her, sitting across from a colleague, trying to hold herself together while a cooking segment plays out behind her, and the country watches and wonders what is happening behind her eyes. That image is almost too much to process, because what she is carrying is not ordinary grief. It is not the grief of loss that has a shape and a date and a ritual. It is the grief of not knowing, of waking up every morning and the first thought being the same thought it was the morning before and the morning before that. Where is she? What happened? Was it because of me? The family cannot grieve. They said that in their statement on day 50. They can only ache and wonder. And now on day 54, the world has watched Savannah say out loud what the aching and wondering actually sounds like when it stops being a carefully worded public statement and becomes a woman crying and apologizing to a mother who cannot hear her. The forensic science running in the background does not feel this. The genetic genealogy building 2 family trees from public DNA databases does not feel this. The cell tower cross-reference from January 23rd and February 1st does not feel this. But the people in this community who have followed this case from the first week, who have watched every video, read every statement, stayed up late reading about a woman they never met, feel it. Because Nancy Guthrie is not a case file. She is someone's mother. She is someone who sat at a dinner table on January 31st and played games with her grandchildren and let her son-in-law drive her home and walked through her front gate and closed the garage door and never made it to the morning. Her back doors were propped open when Annie arrived. Her medication was on the counter. Her hearing aids were in the house. Her phone was on the nightstand. And somewhere between 1:47 and 2:28 in the morning, while the neighborhood slept and the cameras on one side of a neighbor's house went dark, an 84-year-old woman in her pajamas without her shoes was taken from the only home she had known since 1985. The DNA is still processing. The genealogy is still building. The cell towers still hold data that has not been fully analyzed publicly. The router from Nancy's home has been in FBI possession since the first week of February. The camera outage footprint map is being constructed. January 11th is now a public investigative date, with the entire Tucson community being asked to search their memories and their camera systems. And the task force of 4 dedicated detectives and a sergeant working full-time out of the FBI's Tucson field office is building something that has not yet been made public. The science does not need the sheriff to be honest to deliver its results. It does not need the crime scene to have been perfect. It needs time and a laboratory and the kind of methodical forensic patience that closed the Golden State Killer case after 40 years and connected Brian Koberger to 4 murders in weeks. As both of those outcomes are possible from where this investigation stands right now. The question is not whether the evidence eventually speaks. The question is how much the decisions made in the first 20 hours of this case will complicate what the evidence says when it finally does. Drop your thoughts in the comment. Let me where you stand. Tell me what I missed. What did you think has happened about the back door propped open? I want to know your view. Subscribe, turn on notification, share this video with anyone following this case. The next update will cover the randoms letters Savannah Guthrie talk about, and that update may change everything. Nancy Guthrie is still missing, and someone somewhere know where she is.